Your brain on climate.
Right, hello, Dave here, and welcome to this episode of Your Brain on Climate. You've joined me at the start of an experiment there. So, turn volume on. Right, jolly good. Okay, so I have just created a TikTok account. Brand new. Oh, and this is happening. I don't know what this is, some sort of weird... A few days ago, I set up a brand new clean account on the social media site TikTok. On the off chance you don't know what a TikTok is, I can now happily report to you that it is a brain-destroying, soul-crushing social media hellhole that is the worst thing I've ever engaged with in my life, or at least it is when you use it in the way that I used it the other day. And I can also advise you that you should not use it in the way that I used it the other day unless you strongly want to feel more stupid and more fearful for the future of humanity than you do now.
Viral tracks new trending topic on creator search.
Okay. Bearing in mind I'm only like 4 videos in, I've just been served a video of a young woman without many clothes on. Let's get rid of that. And now here is another video of a young woman without very many clothes on. I'm 5 videos in. The experiment was this. I wanted to see how much time it would take me to be on TikTok with a completely fresh account before getting served horrible stuff. Now, in theory, TikTok didn't know anything about me other than my email address, like where in the world I was logging in from, I guess, what browser I was using. Maybe it could make some guesses based on that. But that was it. That was all it should know about me. And my plan was to behave as if I was a slightly strange 22-year-old man, and I would try to watch the stuff for the length of time that I thought a slightly strange 22-year-old man would watch it. Not necessarily because I agree with its message, but just because I might sit there passively receiving it and find it interesting, funny, horrifying, transgressive, whatever. And if I thought that like my 22-year-old man in my head would actually like it, I gave it a like. Then if I didn't get it, I'd move on. That was basically the rule. Just behave like I think a 22-year-old man would behave. This is a video of a, lovely helicopter crash, which is actually going... Am I going to look at that? I don't think I want to look at that. A German lady. Oh, I should have stayed in that for longer, shouldn't I? Now, my first observation is that TikTok is a really weird place, full of young people being strange. I am aware I'm a rancid old fart, but lots of it just flat out made no sense to me, like multi-layered levels of meaning referring to other things, memes about memes, all very bewildering. Right, we've now got video of a dog attacking a funeral. Oh. A dog attacking a hearse. That's not good. And dogs underneath a horse's legs. Right. My second observation is how, like, brain stultifying it is. Not the content per se. There's interesting enough stuff on there. I saw some even when I was pretending to be this 22-year-old bloke. But it's just so horribly kind of passive. You very quickly, even when you're conducting this kind of experiment, you get wowed into a kind of passive swiping mush. You just sit there and you let it wash over you, video after video, served to you by an algorithm, flooding into your eyeballs and your ear holes, a thudding rat-a-tat-a-tat of unending content, more and more, and you sit there and you drink it in. So I'll cut back in during the episode and keep you posted with how it went, how long it took me to get served horrible stuff. Why was I doing this? I was on there, Your Honour, for research, because this is an episode all about one of the darker places of the online world. Not a grubby little corner at the edge of things, but a great big cavern in which millions of people, all of them men, hang out. It's a metaphorical place, but a global hyper community. Young men go into it innocently enough, and they may never come out the same again. It's a place packed with grifters and hucksters peddling snake oil to men desperate to feel better about themselves. A place that venerates Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, and the grand high arsehole almighty kingdom of Andrew Tate, to name but 3 gits. And it's a place with a direct through line to reactionary political movements, toxic masculinity, hateful ideas about women, and horrific real-life behaviour towards women, and a line all the way through to the denial of science, including, as we will come to, climate science. Without this place, Donald Trump might not be president again.
The people who are on our team, our teammates, people like Donald Trump, people like Matt Gaetz, people like Brett Kavanaugh, who all got hit with, he's a human trafficker, he's a sexual abuser, they all got hit with this. And then
on this episode of Your Brain on Climate, I'm talking, of course, about the Manosphere. Now, if you don't know what it is, you're about to find out. If you do know what it is, you may not like it. You may know you don't like it, and you may not want to go anywhere near it. But if you are interested in how human brains, in search of belonging and excitement, can be hacked to believe all sorts of weird and nasty stuff about the world, you've got to understand it. So this is Your Brain on Climate, the show about human brains versus the climate crisis. I'm Dave, and full disclosure, I am a man. This episode I'm talking about the online manosphere, what drives it, what's wrong with it, what might even be a little bit good about it, sort of, and how it bleeds through into wider politics and society, including the politics of climate denial. Joining me is James Bloodworth. He's the author of a brilliant book all about the manosphere.
So I'm a journalist and the author of 3 books. Well, really 2 books and a pamphlet, because the first one is shorter. The 2 main books are Hired, for which I went undercover in a series of like low wage jobs in 2016, and my latest book, Lost Boys: A Personal Journey Through the Manosphere, is a kind of a 5-year investigation of these anti-feminist subcultures, male supremacist subcultures that are online, but it's also kind of offline as well in courses, boot camps, Andrew Tate type figures. That's what I've been doing the last few years, and the book came out in June.
So we'll hear more from James in a minute. Before we get going, just the usual housekeeping. This is a listener-supported independent podcast. That's something it's increasingly hard to be these days. Without your kind support, there is no show. I pay my guests for their time. So if you want to join the loyal lot, chipping in a few quid to independent podcasting as a thank you, you can do so over at patreon.com/yourbrainonclimate. And you can email me, hello@yourbrainonclimate.com, with any thoughts on the show. I love to hear listeners who email in, or to support me financially or otherwise some other way. And please, if you like what I'm doing and you do nothing else, pop onto your podcast medium of choice and give me a 5-star review and write something with your hands. I know you hear this all the time from all those massive podcasts you listen to. They don't need your love and support. I do. It makes a massive difference. And remember, this is a show about learning things. So when you hear this noise, it denotes wisdom. You can check out the link that I put in the show notes for more info. So let's get on with it, and let's get on with the chat with James. James's book, Lost Boys, starts with a bang. This is not like some of the books on the manosphere that are out there, like a kind of distant, snooty, scholarly book observing the manosphere down the end of a telescope. James knows whereof he speaks. He knows of its seduction for lost young men, because he was one.
Yeah, the book starts by going back to 2006, when I was kind of a very socially awkward 23-year-old who came to London because I'd signed up for a pickup artist boot camp, which was not my proudest moment in hindsight, but at the time I didn't have a girlfriend. I'd been like, I think 6 or 7 years since I'd had a girlfriend. I didn't go out a lot. I had a small circle of friends, but my social skills had kind of atrophied. Then I found this community online when I was looking for Googling or whatever it was, MSN, or I can't remember what the search engine was then, searching for kind of how to ask a girl out in my college. And I found these forums of these men who purported to have all the answers to my questions, that, if I just listened to them, I'd be able to fix my dating life. Not only would I be able to ask this girl I was interested in out, but I would also be able to basically approach and attract any woman I wanted to. And at that time in my life, that was quite appealing. And I had some money from like a car accident. Someone had crashed into me, and it wasn't my fault, and I was slightly injured, but I got some compensation, and I threw away £2,000, very expensive, for this weekend boot camp in London in March 2006. So I travelled from Somerset, where I was living in the countryside, on a coach on a mega bus, I think it was, and came to the big city for the first or second time to do this, to learn, to fix my problems as I saw it at the time.
And were your problems fixed? What happened?
No, I mean, no, they weren't fixed, but it did help in some ways. So I'd be lying if I said it was just kind of, I mean, obviously it's a huge expense, and there was a lot of like nonsense and bullshit I had to unlearn afterwards, as I kind of realized that these were kind of like snake oil salesmen selling this kind of advice. But I mean, I also started to go out more, and started to go out to meet people more and socialize more. So I'd say, it wasn't all a waste of time. That there was 20% of it was useful advice, like go out more, when you go out more, make an effort to talk to people, view your kind of social skills as something that can be improved over time. It's not just kind of fixed. That was helpful, but then it came with all of this misogynistic ideology, kind of wrapped in this misogynistic ideology, which was the negative part. Which is that was and it is very negative. Like the longer you stay in that subculture, I think the more damage it does, the more it takes to unlearn a lot of that stuff.
It can take a man decades of blood, sweat, and tears to create an empire, and only one trifling hoe to crumble it all.
I don't see any regulating force for that terrible femininity, and it seems to me to be invading the culture and undermining the masculine power of the culture in a way that's, I think, fatal.
What are the best and worst?
So what is the Manosphere then? Well, it's a lot of things, as James is going to explain in a minute, but core to it is that it's based online. It's enabled, it's maybe even critically defined by the social media age and the algorithms that prop them up. That's why I subjected myself to this TikTok experiment that I was already beginning to regret. That's an advert. That's a German lady without any clothes on.
What's wrong, James?
When I turned up at university in the late 1990s, believe it or not, I was a kind of, sheltered, lonely, scared, generally a bit peculiar lad, or at least I felt like one. Happily, and I do mean happily, social media didn't exist back then. I do wonder quite a lot, not least when doing this experiment, what the hell I would have made of social media, and how alluring I would have found then what the Manosphere is now. I fear quite a lot. I would have found quite attractive the basic idea of finding people who give you interesting and truthy sounding advice on stuff you're insecure about, and there being loads of other people you could become aware of who feel the same way. And I think I would have found that unending scroll of content, all of which reinforces my priors, horribly addictive. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. First up, what actually is the Manosphere, and who are the mans that are in it?
There are loads and loads of masculinity entrepreneurs, as I would call them, really, because they are salesmen who, going all the way back to 2006 or 2005, when Neil Strauss, the journalist, brought out a book called The Game, which was kind of this undercover, not really an expose, but this undercover journey through the pickup artist world. But it was very sympathetic. Like he basically went native and became a pickup artist himself. This spawned that book. Sold 2 million copies. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for quite a period of time. And it spawned this entire industry of budding pickup artists who set up businesses kind of purporting to teach men how to pick up women in bars and clubs, and charging like exorbitant sums of money for it. And there was actually like quite a big market for it. And over the years, that sort of spawned these other offshoots. It sort of there were different kind of branches that kind of sprouted off from that stuff. So there was the red pill, as it's called. Those guys were much more political, much more conspiratorial. So they were less concerned with meeting women and more concerned with kind of philosophizing about how the world had kind of gone to pieces because feminism and men were kind of having a hard time because feminism and also that everything you've been told about oppression was wrong and that actually men were oppressed by women. And the red pill is from the Matrix film. So the red pill is the idea that in the Matrix that you take the red pill and then you see the truth, you see reality for what it really is. In the Manosphere, that's, or the red pill in the Manosphere is you take the red pill and then you see that actually it's men who are the oppressed sex and not women. Men languish under the boot of feminism, etc.
After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Incel community, involuntary celibates. They make an identity out of being single and not being able to have sex, and they have this kind of philosophy similar to the red pill, but they're very anti self-help. So they're very anti. It was partly a reaction to the game and a reaction to this idea, reaction to these scammers and masculinity hucksters who were purporting to fix all their problems for like a few £1,000s, and these people like rightly saw through that, but they kept all of the misogyny. So they still maintained that all the misogynistic stuff of the red pill is true, but the self-help aspect is pointless. There's no point. It's all genetically determined, etc. And yeah, those are kind of the main groups. And then there's also kind of branches of like men going their own way, which are like male separatists who think you should disassociate completely from women, and like men's rights activists who it's very much concerned with kind of the legalistic stuff and men being supposedly oppressed by institutions in contemporary society, but similar to the red pill. But yeah, that's the spread of it. And then there's just a deluge of YouTube influencers just kind of touting this stuff and making men feel insecure in order to sell them courses. And obviously the most famous person or notorious person is Andrew Tate, who does that.
Yeah, say a bit more about, you'd been doing well to avoid Andrew Tate, but it is possible maybe, people might be listening in countries where he's not known or just don't know about him. Who is this geezer? In what way does he represent what's going on in that manosphere?
Andrew Tate, yeah, I mean, Andrew Tate is not, the manosphere is obviously much more than Andrew Tate and has been around for quite a lot longer. It's been around for several decades, really. I mean, it didn't start in 2005 even. That was just when it became a bit more mainstream. Andrew Tate is a former kickboxer, former Big Brother house contestant, someone who was always trying to be famous. Ever since he was quite a young man. He's from Luton in England. He only became really famous when he became kind of a Manosphere internet troll, someone who said these outrageous things about women on Twitter, as it was at the time, or then it became X, and he was still doing that. TikTok. He became famous by saying these like radioactive comments about gender relations, about politics, and also he used this very clever marketing strategy of recruiting these young men for his courses. So he sells courses like all of these masculinity gurus do. He recruited lots of young men who were on his course to make copycat accounts of him and propagate his videos on platforms like TikTok. And he kind of, in 2022, he really blew up. Like he kind of was the most Googled person on not sure the most Googled person on earth. I mean, he says that, but he was one of them. He was on all the news channels around the world at one point, purely because he was very good at marketing, like a lot of these characters are.
Speech. I give my heartfelt congratulations to the new class of slaves, instilling your minds with insidious propaganda and providing you with very little information of actual value. You will now be able to apply your skills to the workplace to earn menial pay.
Only a few videos into my TikTok experiment, and it was going well, or not well, depending how you look at it.
just Britain, my friend. What's wrong, James?
That is, what am I, 11 videos in to a brand new account, and I got served.
What's wrong, James?
Don't think we need to hear any more of that. An AI baby saying, sorry, the thing that you heard. That's an advert.
Yeah, just
one of the things that you are at pains to say in the book, and what I like about it, and maybe what distinguishes it more from some of the more sort of, academic-y external takes on this thing, is you're a little bit more understanding, it seems to me, of, the lost boys that go in there and then go on this sort of journey. They may or may not, but go on a journey. You don't start out going into the Manosphere looking for advice on how to lock up women, but that's kind of how for how a lot of people end up. What's that journey like for people in there, do you think?
So radicalization is interesting to me, and it's something that happens. It's a real thing, just to state the obvious. But sometimes I think groups like this, the men within those subcultures, they're treated as if they kind of were born as misogynists, and it's not really, it's just bad men, or they're just people who just hate women, and it's something almost intrinsic to them. And it's not really. I mean, there are examples of that, but most of the people I met are not like that. It's a gradual process of radicalization. They would even someone like Andrew Tate would deny that he hates women. I mean, he doesn't believe that he actually does it. Obviously, the things he says about women are repulsive, and it encourages like coercive behavior. I think there's strong evidence of that. But I mean, and I think people get radicalized. People who produce the content can also get radicalized by their own content. So some of them put on this persona for the internet, saying outrageous things to cut through the algorithmic sludge, as it were. And then in the process, the mask comes to fit the face with time. So they become more radicalized. But the average, a lot of the guys I spoke to or met who became more radical over time, or became more misogynistic over time, it was like a pipeline of, they would start consuming some videos about like either pickup artistry or even like workouts or combat sports, and it would kind of be sprinkled in. The misogyny would be sprinkled in first of all, and then the algorithm would maybe serve them up more misogynistic influences, more political influences, and they'd kind of gravitate towards these online spaces on platforms like Rumble, for example, where it just was seen as countercultural to support Donald Trump and reject the like liberal elite, or I mean, it's similar to populism in some ways, and then they kind of start to they find these people who make them feel insecure and insignificant, or tap into existing feelings of insecurity, and then present themselves as the solution, like these very charismatic figures on platforms like Instagram or TikTok. And like social media has played a big role. It's the way that people can kind of draw younger men in with that charisma, and also with the lifestyle. So projecting this, you have these influencers sat in front of this very ostentatious lifestyle, telling these young men, the reason you don't have this is because there's a feminist conspiracy, and also, because the women aren't interested in average guys anymore. They're only interested in these like high status men. Other men won't respect you. Women don't want you. You'll be poor all your life. But if you buy my course, you can be just like me.
It sounds like it's giving some young men a sense of belonging. It sounds like it's actually, at the very sort of human level, the reason that people stay in it is because they fit there. If it's giving them something they're not getting from somewhere else, would that be fair?
Definitely, there's definitely that. There's definitely an aspect of that. There's for some men, it's who get into, say, the pickup artist groups, or there's kind of a locker room vibe to it. There's a locker room experience for them where some of them have never really had a close group of male friends before. So they're bonding over. I mean, they're bonding over putting women down sometimes. They're bonding over kind of picking up women, treating women as kind of trophies and things you accumulate to increase your status among other men. But it is a kind of locker room experience for some guys who haven't always had. I've heard one of the gurus say this to the students, that this is probably for some of you your first true locker room experience. You know, all the guys together, and also that aspect of sharing. There's an aspect of vulnerability, paradoxically, in some of these courses, because the people who sign up to the courses, there is a sense that they've suspended their ego a bit because they're asking for help. They're saying, you know, well, I don't know what I'm doing, and so there is a bit of vulnerability, weirdly, and that creates a bond between some of the students when they share, you know, why they've done this thing that would be embarrassing for most people, signing up to a program for how to pick up women or something, and they feel free to share in a way they've never done before. The problem is that's kind of exploited by these kind of guru figures who exploit it for profit, basically.
I'm gonna ask you once, okay? No matter what's happened, no matter what you've done or you haven't done, I want you to tell me the truth. Did you do it?
I think a lot of this might have first come to people's attention when they saw Adolescence, the Netflix drama, and that sort of shows more than anything else. It shows the sort of invisibility of this, you know, and until it becomes very visible for people. To give us a sense of the scale of this, like if you've never really heard of this isn't just a few blokes in their bedroom. This is something with quite a significant scale, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's hard to put like a precise number on how, because there isn't like a manosphere you join and then kind of drop out of. But I mean, the content some of the big content creators in the manosphere. I mean, a few years ago that would have been Tate, or there's a lot of people who kind of use manosphere concepts and have, you know, some big creators on YouTube. You know, millions and millions of views on their videos. There are people on, you know, some of the courses I spent time with, or embedded in some of these masculine alpha male courses. They do a lucrative business. There's no shortage of people signing up for this stuff, and the forums. I mean, some of the Reddit forums, some of them have been quarantined now, so you can't actually join anymore. But they had hundreds of thousands of members, and also Adolescence is. Yeah, it was good. I thought it was a good piece of drama. It's slightly misleading because it's a piece of fiction. So you need that kind of dramatic, climactic aspect to it. But most of the manosphere influence doesn't really most of the time lead to some murder. I mean, there are examples I cite in the book of these apocalyptic kind of crimes, mass murders in some cases, but it's very seldom does that happen. It's more insidious. So you have manosphere attitudes that creep into the mainstream. So the 80-20 rule is a manosphere trope that women are only interested in 20% of men post the sexual revolution, because women used to be pressured into getting married and settling down, and they're not anymore. And now they just are interested in pursuing like the guys with the best genes or the most money, or this is a very Darwinistic view of women and the world. And there's a very direct link to these manosphere memes, these red pill memes that women only want. You know, women only want the alpha male, bro. It's like there's all of this content that seeps into the mainstream gradually, or into relationships with like more coercive behavior, more controlling behavior, and the belief that feminism has gone too far is also. There's been several pods done on that. That's the manosphere influence, where it's felt, I think, more than. You know, these big crimes, although those things do happen. I mean, that was cited in Adolescence. That was mentioned in Adolescence, the 80-20 rule. It's the kind of the main kind of manosphere trope that's. You don't need to watch Andrew Tate videos to believe this now, because it kind of seeps into other content creators, memes on other platforms. That I mean, well. And that to me that's an obvious manosphere trope that seeps into the mainstream.
Yeah, and there was another thing I saw that, while happily, I think the majority of young men have a negative view of Andrew Tate, right? and most of them have heard of them, there's something like a quarter of young men, I can't remember exactly how that's defined, have a positive view of Andrew Tate. So like 1 in 4 young men. I mean, this is scary stuff, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a quarter of those who are aware of him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was. Yeah, I remember this. 83% had encountered him, and a quarter of those who. Yeah, I mean, it's discomforting. I think the other thing with this is some people will say that they watch it as entertainment. They watch someone like Tate as entertainment because he has this very bombastic personality, this larger than life like persona. He is partly playing a character. But even if you think you're just consuming it as a form of entertainment, I think the idea that therefore you're inoculated against radicalization is false. I mean, I wouldn't say that of anyone. I wouldn't say that of myself if I'm consuming a lot of someone's content. Things just kind of seep into your psyche, your worldview. It shapes your worldview, even though you don't know it. So I think it's and it's benignly called content. It's benignly we give it this benign label of content when really it's advertising. And the idea that I believe that advertising works. I believe that companies spend vast amounts of money on advertising because it actually works. And Tate in that, what they're doing is a form of advertising. They play on people's insecurities. They create a market for their products by making men feel insignificant and insecure, and make them feel like there's this threat of being alone because they're not part of the 20%. And then they present themselves as saviors and guides and come along and say, well, I've got just the product for you to solve your problems. So yeah, I mean, consuming the content is bad in itself. I think can be very bad, but it's also you kind of also don't necessarily know what you're consuming. Like there's no warning that this is actually an advertisement. There's no, it's quite insidious.
Your brain on climate.
Welcome back to Your Brain on Climate. I'm Dave, and in this episode I'm talking to the journalist James Bloodworth, author of the brilliant book Lost Boys. That's his journey into the so-called Manosphere, the sprawling online world of men talking to other men about masculinity and stuff, but not in a good way. Now, when I was explaining this episode to my mates in the pub the other day, they said, sounds interesting, Dave, but what the hell's that got to do with climate psychology? Well, here's the thing. The Manosphere is a place where belonging and vibes are king. And we're making insecure people feel good so you can hoodwink them. That's the number one order of business. It's a place that eats steak, adores strongman rulers, and it thrives on conspiracy theories, including that climate change is a hoax. And the Manosphere isn't static, it changes minds. People don't usually go into the Manosphere with strong opinions about climate one way or the other, but they might be a lot more likely to develop them and other stuff as the tendrils of belonging and the spiral of radicalisation kicks in, all powered by that algorithm that rewards ever more outrageous content that keeps you hooked. So the Manosphere isn't a thing that sits there quietly in a shadowy corner of the web. It seeps out into our politics, and our politics seep into it. Elon Musk, previously mentioned, right-hand man of the right-wing demagogues. He's got a social media site all of his own, specifically designed to pump his views, which are right-wing and horrible, into the minds of billions. For him, the Manosphere is a two-way thing. He's helping to reinforce it, and it's building his strength. And some say that over here, Nigel Farage, and in America, Donald Trump, wouldn't have anything like the stature that they do have without the Manosphere. So I don't think you can understand the modern world or what's happening to our politics without lifting up its sticky flaps and having a look. So I'm interested in some of the bigger picture on this, and a thing that is said, and I'm interested in your view on this, if you have insight, is that the Manosphere, broadly defined, is the reason Donald Trump got to be president again. The last US election was swung by these young men turning to Trump. What do we know about that? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a very, very broad definition of the Manosphere, it's not really one I use in the book, but although I do touch on it at the end of the book, that there are these kind of Manosphere adjacent spaces such as the Joe Rogan podcast, for example. I wouldn't say Joe Rogan is part of the Manosphere, because the Manosphere for me, it is those anti-feminist subcultures, these very, very, in some cases, political subcultures, pickup artist, red pill, incel. But there are these kind of locker room type spaces where Manosphere ideas are more welcome than they would be in kind of the traditional mainstream media like CNN or the BBC or something, where you can have people on who will espouse kind of quite simplistic ideas based in evolutionary psychology about, men are like this, women are like this. Jordan Peterson has been on there doing that, talking about how women, cheat on their partners with high status males, and this kind of view of men and women. And did it help Trump? I mean, yeah, it helped Trump to some extent. I think because those are the platforms that young men are listening to more. I mean, people in general are listening to, younger people in general are listening to, getting their news from TikTok and Instagram and online more than the traditional institutions. And someone like Trump thrives in that environment where, on like Joe Rogan podcast, where there are very few difficult questions, where it is that kind of more laid back kind of locker room experience, that chat, that kind of off the cuff, off piste thing where, yeah, Rogan he's not a journalist. And there's nothing wrong with him not being a journalist, but I think there is something wrong with that replacing journalism in terms of when politicians are running for office, because they're not really interrogated. It's kind of this matey vibe to it all. But it's young men are tuning into that because, they relate to someone like Rogan or some of the guests he has on who are into things like combat sports or weightlifting or cannabis in the United States or whatever, just things that aren't traditionally like intellectual, but they're also very curious. They also like to, autodidactic, often like to learn about these things and don't feel like there is a gatekeeper standing in the way saying, oh, this is not for you. I think it's very empowering for a lot of men, but it also comes with that right-wing politics. Increasingly over the years, it's become more and more like that, like, as Rogan as an example, and more conspiratorial post-COVID.
Now, at this point, I think it's important to say a thing, and that is that while it's the case that at the last American election, young men did vote narrowly for Trump, and that vote moved for the first time away from the Democrats, it's a little bit more complicated than just young men now support Trump. In fact, it's a lot more complicated than that. Look, the broadcast, the Joe Rogan, all of that sort of stuff, they platform Trump, and I'm pretty sure loads of young men were attracted to his kind of strong man image, his wealth or the projection of wealth and the thinly coded misogyny that he exudes. I'm not saying that's not the case, but people jump to all sorts of quick judgments about that, and maybe there might be something a bit more sophisticated going on, or maybe less sophisticated, which is like Trump promised tax cuts for people without much money, no taxes on tips, that kind of thing. And that was quite attractive for younger people that didn't have much money. And the signs are now that young men might be drifting away from him. Earlier this month, the Democrats took Virginia from the Republicans in a state election with a strong youth vote, women and men, for the Democrats. One of the main reasons why. So look, this stuff is complicated, but for all that, the Manosphere remains a powerful force. And however big its influence, it definitely trends rightwards. And through the kind of drip of radicalisation and activation inside it, pushes the men in its spell in that direction too. How worried are you about the implications of all of this for things like democracy and progressive politics and all of that stuff? How are you personally feeling right now? Yeah, I am. I'm worried about the political side of it the kind of the way the techniques that the Manosphere uses in terms of selling its products and its courses and its kind of scams to young men, and that it's a similar kind of sales funnel to how political entrepreneurs, right-wing radical right populists, I mean, not just like boilerplate conservatives, but radical right populists do something similar. So it's discrediting institutions, discrediting mainstream institutions. Then the charismatic leader gives someone to blame and someone to follow, a cause to join, purports to have all the answers by blaming, saying women and minorities have
hoarding all the treasure, or everything's gone wrong because women have the vote, or in the case of the populists, because asylum seekers are filling up the hotels. That's why our institutions and our infrastructure is dilapidated because of that, and it's obviously not because of that at all. They're in the hotels because of years of austerity and because there was that running down of the Home Office and the Border Force and the bureaucracy and the red tape, as they like to rail against. And now they're running against the mess they've created. So they've created a situation that it isn't very nice, and they're making great headway by running against it because it's not very nice. Like Nigel Farage in the UK would be a perfect example of the leading advocate of Brexit is now is now leading the polls. Instead of taking responsibility, it's finding new scapegoats, you know?
Yeah, and I was wondering, it makes me think if Farage, I don't think, has ever said anything about, you know, women are taking over and men should blame women or any of that stuff. He's never remotely gone anything like that, but he probably doesn't have to, right? Like, all he has to be is a kind of symbol of a worldview that feels like it has its place with, you know, the sort of communities and attitudes more broadly about authority and you know, and decline in the Manosphere. And all you need to do is be that person and be a particular style of character, and you've probably done most of the job of attracting that sort of person, right?
Yeah, and Nigel Farage has described Andrew Tate as a role model for men. He's been photographed with him. He's been photographed with Conor McGregor, who was sued for rape. In the United States, I think it was. It may have been Ireland, but he was sued for sexual assault. And so, I mean, the company he keeps, I think, is fairly damning in that aspect. You know, maybe he could say, plead innocent, say he didn't know about that stuff at the time. But there are elements within Reform or some of the parties like the rump of UKIP, who espouse elements of that which espouse, like, you know, feminism's gone too far and men need to be strong and men need to be like, if you're not like that, you're not really a man, and men need to be the providers and protectors again, protecting white women from foreign men. Men need to do this. Men need to get on the streets and do this. I mean, the protest last year following the horrific Southport murders, there was a high proportion, I can't remember the exact figure, but a high proportion of the men who were, and it was almost all, overwhelmingly men, who were arrested for taking part in the violence and the riots had already pre-existing domestic violence convictions, while also saying that they were taken to the streets to protect women and girls. So there is that element of using the idea of protecting women and girls from foreign men, but actually a strong element of misogyny within some of those movements. Again, not every traditionalist has sympathy for Andrew Tate. I mean, Jordan Peterson has spoken out about Andrew Tate, even though he's also said many things I disagree with. But there is an element of, we need to return women to the home. That's part of some of that radical right rhetoric.
Thing is, I'm not even sure what's real anymore. Is this a real thing? This is some sort of... Oh, they've done some entrapment. They've entrapped this guy. It's some vigilantes. Oh, wow. Advert. About 15 minutes or 20, 25 videos, something like that, into my TikTok experiment. Most of what I was getting served was pretty horrible. Like racist, xenophobic stuff. Not what you might call manosphere content per se. I wasn't getting much of anything that was like hating women or anything like that. Probably because, you know, my original plan was maybe to go search for things that might start to send you down that rabbit hole. A few people had said search like mixed martial arts, which real men are supposed to like, that kind of thing. But I couldn't really work out how to search properly because I'm 47, and I'm going to level with you. I was finding it all pretty overwhelming as it was without it getting worse.
This weekend, masked Muslim men turned a part of London into one of those no-go zones that definitely don't exist.
GB News. I've ended up on the GB News site. That is, for anyone international, GB News is like a right-wing, I guess, Britain's equivalent of Fox News. Being on TikTok when you are deliberately subjecting yourself to a slew of horrible stuff reminded me of the first time we let our cat Maggie out into the garden when she was young. She just sort of stood there, eyes wide like saucers, drinking it all in, like equal parts fascinated and horrified by the pulling back of the curtain. Well, that was me on TikTok with my lovely algorithm now happily serving me reform videos and racist stuff. This self-reinforcing world that I'd heard about and I'd seen through a glass darkly, I was now 3D surrounded by. It was getting a bit much. I'd proved some sort of point to myself. I didn't really need to go and get women-hating stuff as well. The experiment was showing me, though, how quickly a casual user could end up in a spiral of worsening, radicalising content. You start out seeing something you like. Maybe it's a bit transgressive. Maybe it talks to the darker side of your soul that you're not allowed to acknowledge in public. And the algorithm goes, all right, great, you watched that for a bit longer than the other videos, so I'm going to give you something a bit like that. And that's what's scary about the algorithm. It's brutal and it's amoral. It's not deliberately trying to turn you into a fan of Andrew Tate or Nigel Farage. It's just that sooner or later, if you like stuff even vaguely on the terrain of the stuff that Andrew Tate bangs on about, like fitness, sunglasses, cars, or even just wanting to get a girlfriend, you're probably going to end up there. And if you end up there and you like his stuff more than you like other stuff, you may never get out. This time last year, I interviewed the brilliant Kris de Meyer about how polarisation happens. And Kris said you don't just wake up one morning to decide that you've got a radical position on the world. You get there in bits. You get there slowly, incrementally, through tiny steps in what you believe about the world changing, in which the next slightly more radical idea feels like it's not a huge jump, and then that becomes normal to you and you're ready for the next one. This algorithm, under things like TikTok and YouTube and all of that, it's radicalisation in action. And that probably explains a great deal about how the Manosphere takes people on this political journey, where conspiracy theories start to make more sense, including about climate change.
The Manosphere itself is premised on a conspiracy theory. And even when I took the Pickup Artist Bootcamp, it was premised on a conspiracy theory that the truth about gender dynamics, about relationships between men and women, had been hidden from me, about that I was being too much of a nice guy, and you needed to this was partly because, you know, society had lied to me about what women were actually interested in men. They would say, you know, society told you to be just this nice guy, but what women want is like an alpha male who takes charge and dominates everyone around him and this kind of stuff. And but there's also kind of more prosaic stuff they would feed you, like that wasn't actually wrong. So this is the thing with these conspiracy theories. Sometimes there's like a kernel of truth to something they might say.
There usually is, right? With like pretty much all conspiracy theories have got something in there somewhere. If you drill down into it, that, you know.
Yeah, there's in a broad sense. Yeah, there's like, you know, we don't trust some institutions for good reasons because of things that have happened in the last like 2 decades. But they would say that, you know, the advice I'd received about, you know, just be yourself. Just, you know, fate will take care of itself in the end. That was bad advice, and that was kind of the mainstream advice. Whereas they would give you more unvarnished advice, like, oh well, no, you need to improve your social skills. You need to dress better, and you'd hear that, and it was kind of, could be like a revelation, and then you think, well, maybe the mainstream's lying about these other things as well, and so you kind of you start to adopt this identity around being kind of, I have the truth and other people are just sheep, or other people aren't privy to the information I'm privy to, and it's quite an addictive thing. And then you can delve more into, well, maybe the mainstream's wrong about this other stuff as well. I mean, with COVID, there's the COVID vaccine. There's also a very strong element in the Manosphere of being organic, authentic, and getting back to like stripping away like science and getting more in touch with your primal urges, and strengthening your immune system, and like general crankery around wellness and things like that, which there is a strong element to that of rejecting kind of the pointy heads doing the science with their college degrees and stuff, and like, actually we know we're the true intellectuals, and that sense of supercilious, like, yeah, it really plays on that sense that, you know, there's a lot of men or a lot of people out there who find it attractive, and I did at one point in this area, I think we all do something. Having the secret knowledge that other people don't have. That's it's become more attractive for some reason in recent years. That sense of, well, you know, I actually know better than these elites who have all their letters after their name or something.
Which is presumably something to do with internet subcultures in general, right? That, like, not just the Manosphere, that they're places you can get validated by people who agree with you. And so, you know, you can become more and more convinced, reassured that you are right. And you don't have to expose yourself to counter views if you don't want to.
Definitely. There is that kind of identity that forms around these groups in the kind of the echo chamber, as to use the kind of cliche. And there's also I don't know. There's also like a status that comes from it, which I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but among some of the young men who I met who were attracted to these courses, like, men have lost status relative to women in recent decades, and I don't say that as a bad thing. I mean, it's a relative thing. It's not they're not objectively poorer or objectively having a worse life necessarily, but I mean, relative to women, their status as a provider and protector is not what it once was, is not there at all for many younger guys. And there is this kind of, I mean, Richard Reeves talks about this, there is this kind of discombobulation of men kind of trying to find their status, their role in the world. People get less meaning from work nowadays. There are a lot of jobs. It's more kind of rote and routine, and it's harder to kind of leave your personal stamp on sometimes what you're doing. And so people draw status, I think, increasingly, or groups of people do, and we see this in the Manosphere. They draw status from this idea that they're the true kind of, they really know what's going on. They really, like that conspiratorial, they kind of buttress their egos by this idea that, or prop up their egos by this idea they have access to some knowledge that the normies, they don't have, or the cultural elites don't have. That's a big, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on with the internet and algorithms, but that's a material thing, basis for it maybe.
It's not something you touch on a huge amount in your book, although I have seen some other stuff about this, that something that is going on is young men are eating more meat. So again, Gen Z men are rejecting sort of plant-based stuff and, you know, back to meat, protein, meat, gym culture, strong primal sort of stuff. Is that something which obviously has climate implications, right? Because meat not great relatively for climate change. So is that something that you did see anything of in the Manosphere? For sure.
It was like one example would be during when I was like embedded on the Men of Action alpha male course in Vegas. There would be kind of, they all go out one day for like a steak or something, and it's very much, and it's partly an very American thing. I mean, I like steak, but it's partly like it's like a macho thing, getting together, having a steak, a huge steak, and whoever has the biggest steak is like the most alpha male. I think this kind of like these kind of affectations were popular, and gym culture is more popular than when I was like 25. I'm 42 now. When I was like, I first went to the gym, I think 23, around when I did the boot camp. I started going to the gym shortly after. That was a positive thing I took from it. Like, oh, you should maybe exercise more, work out. That can be a really positive thing, but it can be also a thing that puts pressure on you, or puts pressure on yourself if you think that you're not enough unless you get jacked or get ripped or something. Like, you're not, like you're insufficient as you are. That's a problem with some of this stuff, and the meat eating goes alongside that. You know, you're not a real man unless you eat loads of red meat. And Jordan Peterson had his all meat diet, and again, it ties into some of this stuff. Like, well, the mainstream scientific community has been lying to you about the benefits of fruit and vegetables and the benefits of a plant-based lifestyle, and about climate change as well. That's something that these gurus will say, and so you should basically live a contrarian lifestyle, doing the opposite, because you're the one who has the secret knowledge, the secret source.
We're nearly at the end of my chat with James. We have scratched the surface, and that may be enough for now. of the Manosphere, but do check out James's book Lost Boys for more of his adventures inside it. At this point, before I finish, I want to draw attention to a few things that people have sent my way since I said I was doing this episode. The first thing is we've had a lot of emphasis on young men in this episode. You can partially blame adolescence for that, and when I first conceived of this show, it was young men that I had in mind. Indeed, much of the coverage of people like Andrew Tate and the Manosphere focuses on what they're doing to the brains of young men. There was some stuff came out recently, though, from the pollsters Yougov, which suggested, actually, of all the generations, it's millennials and Gen X, i.e. my lot, not Gen Z or younger, who are the most likely to believe that most of the women want to date a small number of the men, and that women have got a better deal than men in society. Now, to be absolutely clear, right, this is a clear minority of men in all categories. Most men of whatever age do not believe these things, but still, round about a quarter of men my age do. Kind of makes sense. Most of the rock stars of the Manosphere are millennials or older, and it kind of makes sense that the longer you spend in there, the more hardened your views get. So you might expect the older people to be worse than the younger people. It reminds me of something someone said to me about the internet and people in their 40s, which is like my generation, the people round about my age, are sort of uniquely in trouble from the internet. We're young enough to be very comfortable with it and know how it works, but we're too old to have grown up with the savvy and the smarts of younger people. So look, I don't know. It's still clearly a corrosive influence on anyone in it, particularly, I would say, young minds. And so there is a lot of concern about how to keep young men out of it. I was talking to someone yesterday about their 12-year-old, actually 12-year-old girl, not a 12-year-old man, but maybe it holds 13-year-old, who turned around to her dad and said, "You know what? I've come off TikTok. It's all bollocks on there." And she was saying to her dad, "What your generation, like our generation, think you're too worried about kids. We're savvy, we're smart, we see through this." Do you think actually kids are smarter about some of this stuff than maybe their parents might worry?
Sometimes smarter than their parents. Yeah. But I think. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I think there's a tendency now to. I don't know if it's just now, but to kind of fetishize youth has been like that's been obviously it's not a recent thing, but to say that we should just trust like the young people, and to a certain extent that's true. I think it's not helpful to have moral panics about what young people are into, and often there are these huge misunderstandings about aspects of youth culture and music and art and literature as well. But I mean, when I was 23, I didn't have it all figured out. I mean, I was more susceptible than I am now to internet hucksters and get rich quick schemes and things like that. I think you generally are less cynical when you're younger, and that's a really positive thing in many ways.
Speaking as a cynical old bastard, I can assure you that it is. But yes, yeah,
it's like they're not as crotchety as I am now.
Yeah.
But it also leaves you a bit more open to these kind of scammers, I would say, than old hands like us. You know what I mean, though.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Deteriorate. And now I've passed my own sell-by date. Oh, I am no spring chicken, it's true. I have to pop my...
So what then, and I accept this is an unfair, large question, the hell do we do about it? You've got some massive stuff in here all combining. You've got like social media and algorithms and the relatively unregulated nature of that. You've got like genuine disenfranchisement amongst a bunch of people left behind by economic conditions. And you've got populists and scam artists and, various other types of bastards clustering around. What is your sense, if anything, of what turns the tide on this stuff?
So in the book itself, I mean, the book is mainly reportage, same as my previous book. And I do get, questions like, oh, well, you're rather short on answers in terms of what we do about this. I'm not saying that's your question, but I have had that.
Yeah. Can I just say a thing about that, actually? I wanted to say this to you. I'm really pleased you brought that up. I'm so pleased that your book did not end with a chapter which was like, and here are 10 things to be done to dismantle the Manosphere. Yeah. Each one of which is like not going to dismantle the Manosphere, right? You get sort of like George Monbiot writes books like this, where he does like 300 pages of why neoliberalism is stitching everyone up, and then 30 pages of like, what we need to do is have more cake sales in our garden and we'll fix it. Like, it feels false, and I can see why it's in there because publishers want it. But I just want to say I liked that your book didn't do that, and I wish more books didn't feel that they had to.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, they do like you to do that. Publishers and commissioners for newspapers like you to put that stuff in. But I wrote a book that's really like anti-guru, and I don't want to then present myself at the end as a guru who has all the answers. Like, I want to be seen as an anti-guru. As a journalist, it's kind of goes with the territory, or it should do at least. And I feel like I'd be shortchanging people if I, did this lengthy investigation and then kind of at the end I just kind of a couple pages like, well, I've got it all figured out and this is the solutions. Like, I mean, Richard Reeves wrote a very good book, I thought, of Boys and Men, looking at some more policy-based solutions. That what I'm saying is that's another book, the solutions. There's things, because, for example, as an example, a lot of these problems start with regulating kind of the tech industry and social media. And I don't necessarily mean when people hear regulation, I'm just kind of immediately trying to just censor what people could say that, doesn't accord with my own politics. But I think that you now have these kind of these kind of huge platforms which have replaced like public spaces, offline public spaces in many respects, where politics is now conducted. Politics is now these are the commons, but they're not commons. They're owned by oligarchs who have their own very specific political interests. Who, in the case of X, the algorithm is manipulated by Elon Musk to promote his own extreme brand of politics and foment unrest in countries like the UK. I think there has to be some democratic oversight of those institutions. It can't be something that's just the plaything of some very rich individual who can manipulate politics like that. That is the kind of space where politics happen now, and the idea that it should just be completely private hands, no real democratic oversight, I think that is storing up and is creating loads of problems in terms of the content that's being fed to people in order to stir up unrest. That is the purpose of people are incentivized to create that content. They're paid on these platforms to put out really incendiary stuff because it's rewarded on platforms like X if you've got a blue check mark, or it's rewarded because people are attracted to that content. There is something in the psyche which kind of is drawn to the negative or the outrageous or the obscene or these short clips where we're being manipulated like that by these political entrepreneurs.
So we got to smash that.
That's another book. Maybe more. That's another book. That's another book.
Totally, and not only that, but several other books all wrapped up in the conditions of our age. What about, I don't know if you've got kids. I don't have kids. Do you have kids yourself? No. So maybe we're not best placed to advise on this, but I wonder for parents of young men in particular, what you have heard as good advice, or some of maybe friends of yours who do have kids. Like, how do you reframe masculinity and being a man and keep them out of this world?
I mean, I think the version of masculinity that's being sold or promoted through the Manosphere is the idea that you draw your esteem from dominating other people, from being kind of above other people, or other people are kind of you draw your status from having women in this case as status objects, and that's how you should performing masculinity successfully is about having certain status objects, being a provider, having a woman on your arm, not just a woman, but a woman who looks a certain way to impress other men. So I say, I mean, the advice I think that I would give to some of the Manosphere guys who are listening to some of these influencers already would be, try and separate what you actually want from what's kind of you're being fed, these ideals you should aspire to, being put out by these internet figures, these figures with status and clout on the internet. They're feeding you this lifestyle that they say you want this, or and maybe some aspects of that you do want, maybe some of the aspects of that you do find attractive, but also kind of examine what they're why are they promoting that? Why are they making you feel like you're not enough? Why are they making you feel insecure? It's a business. They're hucksters. They're scam artists in my opinion. And I think understand what their motive is as well, and what their interests are, and also figure out what you like, whether it's the type of partner you're interested in. Like the Manosphere has really become performing for other men to impress other men. So it started off when I kind of involved, when I dipped my toe into that world. Yeah, there was people there. I mean, it was really problematic. I wouldn't deny that, but there were a lot of people involved who just like, I just want some like help getting a girlfriend or meeting someone. It's like I can comprehend where you're coming from very much, because I came from that position. But now it's much more about the male gaze. Now it's about impressing other men. I would say, don't feel like you have to perform for other men. Like, try to get in touch with what you want and what you like, and it takes time, but that's the path to happiness, I would say, if that's not too convoluted. Or I think it's a lifelong thing. You're constantly figuring it out, but not having someone else impart their value system on you and decide for you what you want. It's important.
I had enough of my TikTok experiment a lot quicker than I thought I would. It was something like video 30 of positively responding to horrible stuff, and by now literally all I was getting served was exclusively horrible stuff. Wall-to-wall videos for reform, racist, quote, jokes, and Nigel bloody Farage. This, I learned, is the phenomenon called content collapse, when the algorithm has got you completely nailed. It only serves you over and over and over again a very narrow band of content forever, until the only way you can break out of it is by searching for other stuff. As discussed, I could have done that, but I felt icky and I wanted out. This has been a conversation about the Manosphere, how it works, seduces and gradually entraps men, young or old. It lures them into the paws of hucksters, tricksters and some of the nastiest horrible bastards around. Underneath that, one of the core things to blame is the algorithm, and underneath that it's the outsourcing of our attention to the algorithm that means we just sit there, like I did, despite myself, passively swiping, sucking it up, drinking it in. And so the algorithm keeps giving us what we want, no matter what that is. Small hits of dopamine sugar that keep us feeling all right. Now, like James, it don't feel right to wrap up this episode with a kind of trite takeaway, like one of them guru gits off the Manosphere, not for something this complicated, and where I've frankly only scratched the surface of it. I do, though, want to end by remembering James's original entry point into all this. His book is called Lost Boys because he was one. Pick-up artistry, his way in, gave him something he was looking for in his life. Like he said, it wasn't all bad for him, it gave him more confidence. The theories, aspirations, the bonhomie and the Matrix-style big conspiracy theory explanations, they're seductive. They make sense of pain and confusion, or they wouldn't work. For James, it was the start, and happily the end, of what could have been for him a lifetime of radicalisation, of gradually coming to believe all sorts of stuff about women and the world. You can see how it happens. You don't have to go on TikTok to see that. There's a brilliant piece in The Guardian recently by a young man called Josh Sargent, who, when he was a teenager, fell into the Manosphere. And he said that the reason that people, quote, dive deeply into the clutch of the influencers in the Manosphere is because they make us feel listened to, heard, and considered. So look, I just wanted to end. Look, it's tempting to call any bloke who ends up in the Manosphere an irredeemable arsehole, and a lot of them probably are. No probably about it in the case of people like Andrew Tate, but there are much bigger things going on here about why people go in there in the first place. Those things require empathy and education and, helping people who are lost. When it comes to talking about ideas that become polarised, like climate change in the Manosphere, it's important to understand how it is those ideas come to feel like they are true, the process of radicalisation, even if they're not, facts. Karl Marx said that life is a struggle to work out not what is true and what is false, but what makes sense and what doesn't. And the Manosphere shows us what that struggle looks like, writ large. And perhaps if we can understand Manosphere radicalisation with empathy rather than scorn, we might understand climate radicalisation a bit better too. Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Brain on Climate, and a huge thanks to James Bloodworth for coming on. Special thanks to everyone who helped me plot my TikTok experiment. You were all right about how little time it would take to go horrible. A special thanks to Lizzie Murray-Clark for your advice. A big shout out to the work of Cal Newport, whose podcast is great. He did a show all about the TikTok algorithm and how it works, which I found fascinating, revealing, and bleak as all hell. There's a link in the show notes. And check out also the work of Marianna Spring, a journalist who for a long time now has been experimenting with setting up different profiles and seeing what the algorithm does to them, with some somewhat depressing results and implications for how people vote. A reminder that you can support the show over at Patreon, and please, if you like what I've done, give me a review and a rating over at your podcast medium of choice. Until next time, look after yourself and careful what you search for. All right, bye.